And we are back. I just watched episode 5 of season 2 of Rings of Power. Right out of the gate, we gotta compliment the rings. The dwarven rings look significantly better than the elven rings. It's probably due to lighting, and also they just look thicker and bigger. So I like them. They look cool. They give the rings to the dwarves. But now we have a subplot of Durin being very suspicious of the rings and thinking the rings are changing his father, which he's, of course, right about, and egged on by his wife, who, hilariously, last time they were talking, she was convincing him to bring the ring proposal to his father, and now she's flipped on that because, but it's kind of framed as she's always right, which is kind of silly. I like the way they're portraying the dwarven rings. It's very subtle. The rings are giving insight. It's not some explosive magic power. It's just they can see things that other people can't see, which feels right for the nature of those rings. I like that portrayal, and the king being able to know where to dig and see everything. It's really interesting. The conflict with his son is driving me crazy just because of how repetitive it is. We have not had a single scene with this father and son pair that wasn't them arguing or making up after an argument. That is literally the only type of scene these writers know how to do with those two. The first couple were fine and like emotional, but at this point it's just the same thing. They're always arguing, and his father is always on the wrong side. So it feels very one-dimensional and one-note, but it's not the weakest thing in here. So then we get a scene with Celebrimbor and the dwarves, and them like celebrating their friendship that was entirely off-screen. This drives me crazy because this was one of the key things I was excited to see. The friendship between Eregion and the dwarves is very notable in history, and I was so excited for that, and all the interesting parts of that, they decided to skip over. It's such a cool friendship in concept of these elvish blacksmiths becoming friends with these dwarves and them finding common ground, and like all of this fun, kooky, charming relationship that they could have built up. They decided to skip over. All their work and cooperation and coordination happened off screen. And that's just tragic, because this would have been really fun to see. So we get them celebrating it, and they unveiled the door, and how powerful that would have been if we just were able to see that relationship develop and this be a culmination of that. It would have felt earned. But this show is so stretched thin and has all these plots going on that they can't focus on what I would say is the main plot of the show, which is the making of the Rings of Power. I mean, that's the core of the story. It's also, I would argue, the most interesting part of the story because it is the most unique. It's the most original and component that is kind of unique to this show, where everything else is kind of standard fantasy stuff, like the political fantasy stuff. We have people fighting orcs. We have little small people walking through the wilderness. Those are things that have been done before. But something that focuses on the forging of rings is very specific and very unique to this show. It's what they should be focusing on. And it feels like they're hitting the fast forward button through all the good bits, which is the same feeling I get when we talk about these guys, right? This like friendship and manipulative relationship that we have here, Sauron gaining Celebrimbor's trust and them bonding over blacksmithing and them becoming this tight-knit working relationship is very glossed over. When it comes to their working relationship, we have skipped over the honeymoon and gone straight to bickering married couple, where like now they have tensions and Celebrimbor's unsure about him, but he still has this relationship with him, and that relationship kind of was glossed over, right? This is not built up. We're skipping to this, and I feel like that such a missed opportunity. And I know I'm biased because this was as I have been very honest about since the beginning of this series, the blacksmithing relationship between Celebrimbor and Sauron was what I wanted to see in this show from the get-go. That was what I was excited about. So I am biased in that I was like, we should have more of that. Especially since I think some of it, like what we have, is good and I just wish was expanded upon. Like this manipulative relationship works in many places. It's sometimes a little blunt and unsubtle, and sometimes very blunt and unsubtle, but it works. The actors have some actor chemistry, which works in their relationship. I just wish we could see more of it, because I really feel like a lot of the aspects of it don't feel earned. It don't feel earned, right? Also, small blocking thing that I noticed. So when Celebrimbor is initially rejecting Anatar's proposal to make rings for men, see, like, he's up here and Anatar's down here. Usually when block, directors tend to try to put some symbolism or like some meaning into where the characters move during the flow of conversation. That's very common. What they did here kind of confused me, because like when he makes a decision to not help him, he walks down the stairs closer to him, which is the opposite of what's happening in this moment. Right this moment, he is creating a barrier and actually walking away from their relationship briefly. It doesn't last. But in this moment, he's stepping away emotionally. But physically, he's walking towards him. It doesn't really matter, but I feel like it was a little, from a blocking perspective, it wasn't very consistent. Alright, then we cut to this bizarre scene with the Chancellor, who is now king, apparently. We didn't see that on screen, but it's like, trust us, bro. He's king now. He has a scepter. Say goodbye to this son character, because after this scene, he completely does a 180. This is the last scene where he is not just a straight up bad guy. So say your goodbyes to him. This scene is interesting for a number of reasons. First, Pharazon makes mention of envy over elves' immortality, which of course was the driving force in the unrest and resentment in Numenor. It's interesting that they're bringing this up now when they set up this whole thing about them being afraid that elves are going to take their jobs last season, which was very silly. This is like the actual resentment from elves, which is their immortality, and it's brought up here. I hope they expand on that, because that's a more canonical concept that makes more sense. And then he like clearly wants to reach immortality or something, where his son says basically, we have the power to do what we've always wanted, which is to help the country and do this very normal stuff. He's saying something pretty straightforward. It's like, oh, we can seize our power and do all the political things that we've always wanted to do. And he's urging him to do what he's always wanted to do. Very normal suggestion. And then his father reacts extremely like negatively, and then quite out of the blue, like left field.
Build the Numenor you have always seen in your mind's eye.
Once, when you were at her breast, your mother prophesied that you would come to ill ends.
What? Like, how does that have anything to do with the flow of this conversation? It comes out of nowhere, and then it's used to give him a motivation to do what Pharazon wants, which he was already on board for to begin with. It's needlessly cruel. It paints this entire conversation in a very weird light. I'm not sure what they intend to do with this. Then we get a scene where the queen basically is like, if the Palantir is showing something different, maybe it's important that Pharazon actually takes control, and we should just let this happen. And Elendil's like, that sounds ridiculous, but yeah, she's the queen, so he doesn't say that. But they have that scene. In this, Elendil also says that he saw a vision of Isildur in the Palantir. It seems like he did not clock that meant his son was alive, because he doesn't seem to react to that news at all, and doesn't mention it to his daughter when a lot of her motivation is that he's dead. And so I guess he still thinks he's dead. This was an opportunity for the story to reveal that he's alive to his father so we can stop this ongoing train of him thinking that he's dead. But it looks like that they did not use that opportunity for that. Oh well. Then we have this scene, which might be the best crowd work scene this show has done so far, where like all of the people loyal to Muriel are turning in their weapons on the orders of Pharazon, including Elendil, and they're still calling Elendil captain to the annoyance of Pharazon's son, and they kind of start a quiet rebellion of thanking him and calling him captain as he leaves, basically in rebellion. I liked that. It was, I think, one of the few crowd scenes that I think emotionally landed. I think that worked. It was a very sweet scene. So there's the subplot of Gil-galad going on, whether or not he should sail for Mordor with his army, not knowing that the army is actually heading toward Eregion, and him thinking there's something up with Eregion but doesn't know yet, and is he waiting or is he not waiting? So even though she pushed him to convince his father to go through with the rings plan, Durin's wife is now not on board with it because it's not in keeping with the traditions, and the mount, she thinks something's wrong with the mountain, and the ring wrong with the rings, and she's trying to push him to convince his father to stop. Fine, I guess, but it is somewhat annoying because I think this woman has been on the right side of the conflict every single time. Like, it was right to do it this one, but now it's right this. I don't know. It feels a little frustrating, but it's fine. Well, then we have this bizarre scene. Okay, we gotta talk about this scene. Okay, so Durin's wife buys this rock, I think, for her daughter. First of all, I think they should have done a different visual design for the rock, because I was watching this with two other people who aren't like big Tolkien fans, and they one of them thought that the round stone was that was like another Palantir. So, you know, which is obviously not true, and they didn't do anything that implied that. It's just, we had a Palantir last episode rolling down some steps, and it's another spherical rock, so I think it just visually, subconsciously, it makes you think of the Palantir since it happens so close. Just something to point out. We don't even actually know what this rock is. It's a tuning stone, is I think what she said, but we don't know what that means. The important thing is, after the scene where she buys the rock, it rolls down the thing, and we have this bizarre scene where she stumbles through the crowd trying to get this rock, and all it's for, this entire scene is for her to find this cave, that apparently no one has found, even though it is 10 feet from this very busy market. Why is this the way we get her into this room? You could have done literally anything else, but we had to do this very contrived falling stone rolling into this cave, and then she's in the cave, and then she sings, and then the sound happens, and she thinks there's like evil. You could have done this scene any other way, and I think it would have flowed better. But instead, it feels very contrived. It feels very forced. It really doesn't make sense. Like, this cave is like 10 feet from a busy market. What? Okay, I don't know. I don't know what, but it's ridiculous. She could have just been walking and then heard some weird sound and then went down. You did not have to have this contrived stone rolling down steps thing. It's also just, again, subconsciously, I think it messes with some people because the Palantir rolled down some steps last episode, and it's just another spherical rock rolling down some steps. It was ground that's retread for no reason. So I do not understand why this scene was like that. Then we get a dwarf scene and the offering of the rings. So we're seeing that the ring is making the king greedier, and it's concerning his son and his delve master guy. We have to just subtly reference older material. We get a moment where he forgets where he put his ring, and he sounds exactly like Bilbo when he forgets his ring.
What is it?
You took it off.
What is it? What have you done with it?
It's there, sire. You took it off.
Where's it gone?
It's a microcosm of that one scene, but it feels like a reference because it is one.
It was. It was.
We get another argument with his son, but his father's happy with him now and makes him prince again for some reason. It is explained. It's because he's the one who convinced him to go through with the elven ring thing, and he's happy about the elven ring thing. So then we have more blacksmithing stuff, and there's a lady who gets put into the unseen world and sees a flaming creature in the room with them, which is implied that when she put on the ring, she could see Sauron for who he really was, but didn't recognize. For a split second, I thought they were going to do yet another woman who knows and sees a looming threat that no one else does, plot line, but it doesn't seem like they're going for that because Sauron handles the situation in a scene that I liked and made sense, where he convinces her that what she saw was actually the spirit of Celebrimbor, and that Celebrimbor is strained from the labors he's been doing, and that's what she saw. And I liked that. I think that was a clever manipulation. It works well. I like that scene in actually its entirety, with the very significant exception of with him being obsessed with Galadriel and comparing her to Galadriel, so we can throw that Galadriel Sauron ship that they're doing for some reason in the mix, even when they're not together. I do not understand why they think that's a good idea. Oh well. Okay, so then we cut to this extremely strange scene from a blocking perspective. Here's the son of the Chancellor. He is evil now, 100%. Any nuance that you might have read from him, gone. The actor is absolutely loving it, though, and I appreciate that. He seems to be delighted with the evil dialogue he's been given, so good for him. I'm glad he's happy. So he is here to close down the temple because I guess they're doing religious. They're cracking down on the more faithful people here, and he needlessly breaks a statue, which is just to be an ass. It's amazing. It's so over the top. I mean, he's done more evil things than Sauron has in this show. Sauron hasn't done much evil within the show. But this guy, it's amazing. It's great. So anyway, he breaks the statue, which makes everyone, someone punch him. Elendil punches him, and then he makes them hold him down, and then that leads to Isildur's friend, fighting him. It's very strangely blocked, because it's not exactly believable, because this is a hardened soldier who was so good that he got a hit on Galadriel, and this is a politician's son. Okay, so what has happened? It doesn't feel believable with the way they set this up that he would successfully dunk this guy into the water. It just doesn't feel quite right. It's a little strangely blocked. And then we get, oh my gosh. So they have this fight, and then eventually, though, Isildur's friend wins the fight and has him at sword fight, but Elendil convinces him not to go through with it, and actually pulls rank on him, and tells him as his captain to stand down. Which, for a second, I was like, this is going to be an interesting callback of, like, this guy stripped Elendil of being captain. He's the captain of nobody, and everyone still called him captain, and it pissed him off. And now, the fact that he really doesn't have the power to take that authority away from him, coming to save him, would be an interesting moment where he has to reassess and think about it. It would have been a great moment of, like, character reassessment, because they had set that up. It would have worked great. But no. Where that's these setups are not what they're here for. So instead, the guy stabs him, and even though he just spared his life, which, like, I could totally see him arresting him for making a fool out of him. That seemed in his character, but stab him. So when he's about to fall, I assumed he was going to be behind him holding the sword, but no. Look at this. So he falls, and then he catches him, and he's all the way over there. I mean, it's technically possible that he backed up to after he stabbed him, but it does not visually make much sense. Here he is, the sword's not 5 feet long, and then he grabs him, and then as he's falling, this guy is back here. Why is he back here? He's the one who stabbed him. What the hell? That's very simple. Have the man be next to him when he gets stabbed. Am I crazy? Okay, very weird. Just bizarre. Okay, so then we go to more Celebrimbor and Sauron having manipulation off.
Just be mindful someone is not manipulating you.
You see daggers where there are none.
And you ignore them until they are right at your throat.
No.
And he kind of calls him out that he might be manipulating him, which with some dialogue that I enjoyed, of being like, that's your way, right? To plant ideas in heads. It wasn't in this scene, it was in the previous scene. But I like that. There's some fun moments of Celebrimbor sort of, taking a stand and almost pointing out he's being manipulated. But again, it would have just been so nice to kind of see that relationship grow, so that this would feel like a more powerful moment of him finally seeing that. From a wider context, I don't think it really lands, but I liked those moments. Disa, Durin's wife, makes him promise never to wear the ring, and then we go back to the Celebrimbor, and Celebrimbor's like kind of amped because basically Sauron has convinced him that it might be his fault that the dwarven rings are somewhat corrupted, and that it's because he was deceitful and wrote a letter to Gil-galad that wasn't truthful, and that this whole thing had like an aura of deceit around it, and that affected the spiritual components of the smithing project. And that was great, because it's convincing Celebrimbor that he's at fault and not Sauron. And so he's kind of pushing them a little harder than me. Like, he's been portrayed as kind of a kindly older man. The older part doesn't make sense, but whatever. He comes across as a kindly man, and now he's kind of like more harsh and more stern, and it's kind of almost putting his workers off. Complete aside, love this hairstyle. Really pretty. I have nothing more to say about that. Gorgeous. Anyway, and then Anatar afterwards kind of encourages them, and it's, even though he's sounding like that, it's fine, it's because of this. And I like that, because they're working together in a weird way, and I love when those moments happen. It's very fun of him manipulating them in that process. It's great. I enjoy that. And he's just distraught because he's under a lot of stress and clearly being mentally affected by the angel that's trying to twist him. Right? And now we're at the orc. We get a shot of the orcs that are coming closer. Then we are at Gil-galad, who is finally warned by Elrond that the orcs are attacking Region, and he's like,
our armies cannot defeat both Adar and Sauron.
I mean, come on.
We do not have the strength to fight both Mordor and Isengard.
They are so not subtle about their references. They're so not subtle that it's infuriating. Just stand on your own 2 feet. For God's sake. Okay, so anyway, now we're with the orcs. I expected her to be much more roughed up, but it turns out Adar wants to ally with her to fight Sauron, apparently. So that's great. Okay. This is their only scene, and then they cut to black. I don't know what to say about this, right? I enjoyed the Celebrimbor and Sauron stuff. I wish that was more expanded on. The orc... I feel like this show doesn't know what to focus on, right? Basically, the Numenor stuff was, for the most part, ridiculous. It's the weakest by a long shot. The Celebrimbor stuff is the best. I know I'm biased, but it is. I just wish that this show was about the forging of the Rings of Power, like the title suggests. Just the Celebrimbor and the Dwarven Pipeline feels like there's so much that could be expanded upon. This is where the story is. It's so obvious this is where the story is, and they cut out all the meat that would have gone into it, and it's just a fast forward version of this story that should have been the show. But instead, we are stretching it so thin to talk about Numenor, even though Numenor isn't really relevant to this plot yet. Like, they should have started talking about Numenor when it's relevant to the story, but it's not yet. Then there's the Southlands people and Adar, Galadriel, and Elrond, and all of this, and the Harfoots that are still completely unconnected to the rest of the story. All of this it stretches the story so thin that it doesn't have time for its actual main plot. And to the point where I'm not convinced that the writers realize that is the main plot. You named it Rings of Power. And it's also clearly the most important. These rings are going to shape the world and is literally saving the races of Middle-earth or destroying them. This is so obviously the most important. And then we cut to Numenor's political machinations, which we struggle to care about because they haven't really explained what will change about Numenor now that Pharazon is in charge. They haven't set up what the political differences actually are, besides, like, she's faithful and he's not. What is at risk of being lost now that he's in charge? We don't know that. Yeah, he's closing down the temples or whatnot, but we don't know from a wider narrative how is that going to affect the rest of the world. Now that they're in charge. Now, I know, because I read the book, but within the casting story, the stakes of that political conflict are not made clear to the audience. It's just this lack of focus. It's jumping around to things that don't really feed to the main plot. Lack of focus. That's the big problem. But there are things I liked, especially since this episode in particular focused on what I find interesting about the show. I hope we'll see more next episode, but I'll see you then, I guess.